Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wordsmith with Us. I'm Karen Spafford-Fitz, and I'm delighted to be here to offer you the second part of my writing workshop for junior high and high school students called Fiction Writers Triple Threat. And in our first session, we talked about character and how to create a compelling character who is realistic, sympathetic, and who has both positive and negative traits. We also talked about conflict, and we took that character and placed that person into a high interest, high conflict, high stakes situation, and we were writing that story. So what I'd now like to focus on is something that I think of as craft, which is where you take that first draft you wrote and turn it into something really special. And I know a lot of people have this sense that if you're a really good writer, you just whip off these great stories. They're perfect, they're beautiful, seamless, smooth right from the get-go. And I always hate to shatter people's illusions, but I do want to tell you that that's not how it works. I dearly wish it was, but it does not. What has to happen is a lot of crafting of the story. So that's revising, rewriting, proofreading, all of those different steps that take your story from a rough draft into something that's quite polished and quite special. So that's something that's going to help you be a better story writer every single time. And just to prove that that's something that even professional writers have to do, I brought with me my first book, which is called Dog Walker. And Dog Walker is a book that I wrote 8 times, rewrote it 8 times before I turned it over to the woman who became my editor for it. And what happened was once I sent it to her, she still had ideas about how she wanted me to do a little bit of rewriting to make it even stronger yet. So before this book went to print, we rewrote it, or I rewrote it, I guess, about 12 times. And when I wrote my second book, I sent it through to the same editor, and she said to me she really liked the story, but she wasn't really thrilled with the ending. So her take was that it would be better with a different ending. And so I ended up rewriting the final third of the book one more time. And at that point, the book was picked up for publication. I got a book contract for it, which was really exciting. And guess what we then did? We did about another 3 or 4 passes over it to make it as strong as we could possibly make it before it went to print. So I thought today what I would do is tell you a little bit about what I do to craft my stories, to take them from that early rough draft to something that is a little bit, well, certainly that's smoother and more polished. And I think if you follow these steps, it will help you become a better writer as well. So the first thing that I do when I have my rough draft is I reread my story. And I think this will be helpful for you as well. And what I always suggest to people is something that I do too: read your story out loud. And if you're thinking, well, that's going to be a little bit awkward, you know, if somebody walks into my room, you know, my parents, whoever, it's going to look a little bit weird or a little bit awkward. And yes, it maybe does. I have been there, and my family is now used to the fact that when they walk into the room, I might be reading parts of a scene, I might be reading a full chapter, or I might be actually working through the full book, reading it out loud. So it's funny what your ear picks up when you do that reading out loud. The second thing that I suggest you do is go on the hunt for adverbs. And adverbs are those words that describe the verbs or the action words in your story. They often end with an ly. And to me, those are a red flag. Those adverbs are a sign that you have not chosen the best, the most impactful action word that you could. So you can strengthen it by, first of all, pulling out the adverb, so that word that often ends with an ly, pull it right out of there, and then think of a better verb. And I gave an example here. The girl walked slowly across the field. Well, not a terribly exciting sentence. And so what I would do is pull out that word slowly, and I'm going to switch up that verb too. So instead of walked slowly, the girl limped across the field. You get a better visual that way of what's happening with the girl. The girl stumbled across the field. The girl swaggered or staggered or ambled. So in each of those instances, it's a stronger, more specific verb that plants a stronger idea in the minds of the reader. The other thing I always do with my writing is I look to make sure I've written it in a way that is active, because that's going to be what's most interesting. It's going to be what engages my readers the most. So I want to use the active voice when I'm writing my book. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say you or I had written the sentence, "The unsuspecting teenager was bitten by the vampire." Well, this is an example of a passive voice because the doer of the biting, the action, is actually the vampire, but I've just dropped that at the end of the sentence instead of made it the focus of the sentence. So I would rewrite that sentence with the vampire at the beginning. The vampire bit the unsuspecting teenager. So at that point, we're honing right in on the heart of what's going on in that situation in the story. There's one other instance of passive voice that people don't always think of, and it involves the sentence, the words "there is" or "there was," "there were." Here's an example. "There were 3 cats on the table. They glowered at me as I burst into the cottage." Well, once again, we don't need some of those words, right? It's just, it's a little clunky, it's a little awkward. So get rid of the "there were," "there is," "there are." Get rid of those words. So what I would do instead with that sentence is I would say, "The 3 cats on the table glowered at me as I burst into the cottage." Or if you want to switch some of the words around, "As I burst into the cottage, the 3 cats on the table glowered at me." So we've removed the passive voice, and the sentence becomes much more interesting, much more impactful. We've gotten right to the heart of what is what is going on in the story. There's one final suggestion that I'm going to offer you today, and this is something I really spent a lot of time on with my writing, and it is show, don't tell. And I'm going to talk about it in terms of how it relates to emotion, because emotion is what brings your readers along with you when you're writing your character's story. So show emotion, don't tell it. And I gave you an example. Liam was mad. So if I was reading that sentence, I'd go, so what? That's not really terribly exciting. It's not terribly interesting. So what I would do is, instead of telling that Liam was mad, I would try to show it. So think about what you do when you're mad. And that's what I tried to do in this example of how I would fix up that sentence to make it more exciting, to make it have a bigger impact, to hit heavier when I'm writing my story. And I would show, so instead of saying Liam was mad, I would show that he was mad by saying something like, "Liam clenched his hands into tight fists. Liam kicked the locker, then sprinted from the school. Liam stomped out of the kitchen. Heat coursed through Liam's body." And if you notice, in each of those instances, I have not even used the word mad, but the reader is going to read those sentences and be able to relate to those experiences, those times when they felt so angry that their hands just seemed to clench into tight fists all by themselves, or when they kicked a locker or stomped out of the kitchen. The reader is going to go, "Ooh, yeah, I can relate to that. He must be really mad." And that's a more rewarding, impactful reading experience for the people who you're writing your stories for. So I hope those suggestions help you craft your best stories ever. And before I sign off, I would like to thank the Young Alberta Book Society, who organized this particular video series, and I'd like to thank the Rose Foundation as well for funding it. I hope those tips have helped you, and good luck conquering the fiction writer's triple threat. Thank you so much.